If you're wondering what happened to the American dream, you're looking at it. It was right here, almost 100 years ago, that Walter and Cordelia Knott started farming the very land you're standing on.
Walter and Cordelia Knott have a very, very sweet story behind them. They were high school sweethearts who grew up in Pomona, California, and married right out of high school, started having children. Walter was doing pretty well in Pomona. His family was nearby, Cordelia's family was nearby, but Walter Knott really wanted to step out of that Pomona family mold. He really, really wanted to be a farmer. He wound up moving his family out of Pomona into the Mojave Desert. He wound up homesteading in an adobe house. When Cordelia first saw that adobe house, she cried. It was not the life that she wanted for herself or her family, but she stuck by Walter, and they roughed it out for a couple of years. They didn't do very well in the Mojave Desert. Obviously, things were really, really tough. They wound up moving to Shandon, California, and they wound up homesteading up there. It didn't work out for them either. They made some money, but the land was not theirs. It was very important to Walter that he buy his own land. It was Walter Knott's cousin who said, "I'm in Buena Park growing berries. Why don't you come down to Buena Park and tend fields with me?" So Walter Knott came down to Buena Park with his little family in a Model T and wound up learning how to grow berries from his cousin.
Highway 39 was the main route from LA to the southern beaches, Huntington Beach. This happened to be kind of the midway stop, a rest area for those people traveling to the beach.
So in 1927, they bought the land, and believe it or not, they even bought a little bit more. During the Great Depression, they started buying out their neighbors just because Walter wanted to grow his farm, and what a wise choice it was.
They leased 10 acres of land, rented a home nearby, which didn't have indoor plumbing, for $7 a month. They lived in that home for 7 years.
So many times he could have walked away from these fields and just let his debt go, but he didn't. He continued to pay the bank, and he continued to make ends meet by selling berries at a roadside. Some of the things that Walter and Cordelia had to contend with were, for example, frosts and freezes that killed their crops, enormous rainfalls that drowned their fields. They still made a go of it, but they did so as a family.
People who worked here were a lot of people from the surrounding community. They were all friends of the Knotts.
When Walter had this property here in Buena Park, he did have some small shacks and sheds in which people lived. Paul von Kleben was one of his tenants who just lived here. Walter said, "If you can survive on our cooking, you can stay as long as you want."
When the Knott kids were small even, there were other kids who helped pick berries, and it was a very community-oriented farm.
I think that's what people need to remember, is that Walter and Cordelia Knott had 4 children, and they were there every single morning, tending fields with their father and doing everything they could to make ends meet, not just for mom and dad, but for the entire family. It was important when Walter Knott continued to grow this farm that his children were an absolute part of it. What few people realize is that Walter and Cordelia Knott came to this piece of property in 1920, built a house on it in 1927, and they both stayed. They stayed for the rest of their lives. It was a family farm that turned into a ghost town, that turned into an entire theme park, and they were there to watch over all of it. Their names and legacy will live on.